Good afternoon. This is Craig Zucker. I'm an attorney at Maddin, Hauser, and I'm pleased to bring you this week's podcast of Forward Focus. Today we have the privilege, and I'll even say honor, of having with us Dan Orman, the head buyer and owner of Freeds of Windsor. Freeds of Windsor is one of the, if not the largest Canadian independently owned clothing store, specializing in men's, women's, and boys' clothing. Danny is a third generation owner operator. They have a fourth generation in place. And it's just a remarkable story about how this company, this operation has seen and tested time in three different iterations, three different generations of operators to be a thriving retail clothing operation. We've seen the likes of Hudson's, Marshall Field's, Federal's, Crawley's here in Detroit, all fall by the wayside. We know there's problems in the clothing retail sector out there financially and with growth. And yet we have the largest independently owned Canadian clothing operator thriving. And there's something about that we have to share. And so this week we're going to dive into it. And I'm thrilled to bring on Danny Orman. So Danny, let's get started. We want to hear about what I like to say, the secret of the sauce. So please tell us, Danny, what's going on at Freeds that gets you to a fourth generation in place? Tell us your story.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast. I certainly am excited to tell our story because it's a story for the ages, really, Craig. It's something that my family is extremely proud of. So at the onset, 95 years ago, my grandfather came over from Russia and settled in Windsor, Ontario, and opened up a men's and ladies store, probably about 2,000 or 3,000 square feet on the corner of Ottawa Street and Gladstone. It was a store that was small. He had a niche. My grandfather spoke 7 different languages. And at that time in 1929, it was a melting pot. Everybody came over from Europe, from whether it be Italy, whether it be from Russia, whether it be from Hungary, they all settled in Windsor. And my grandfather started a business on the premise that still stands today. It was about honesty. It was about customer service and able to really tell a story to the customers that came in. It wasn't about the sale. It was more about servicing the people of Windsor and giving them the things that they needed. And that's what he provided.
So Danny, what was your grandfather's name?
My grandfather's name was Sam Freed, and the store at the time was called Sam's Department Store.
And as I understand in talking about the story with you, it started out actually as a furrier.
Well, no, that was, we sold ladies' furs. We sold mostly menswear. There was a small ladies' environment. They were actually in our store today from the 1920s and 30s at Freeds. There's actually a fur storage vault still in existence at the basement of our store. So that was something that he did at the beginning. It didn't last long, and it soon became primarily during the course of his career, a menswear environment.
So, and that's the 20s. I mean, we think of the 20s, we think of incredibly financially troubled times.
Sure.
A depression,
right?
A war on the horizon.
You think about it, in 1929, he started a year before the Great Depression.
That's unbelievable.
Right.
And here we are today, 2025, with a flourishing business. So Danny, take us through the timeline here. How does this little family-owned men's, women's clothing store make it to the largest independently owned Canadian retail operator today? Take us through that, because it's got to be a great story.
In the early years, obviously, it was a struggle because of the Great Depression. He got through that through just being present on staff, on the floor, greeting customers, going to market, buying great value, extending that to the customers. And that was really the premise of what was at the time a need in this community, was giving, everybody wore suits at the time. It was you go to the baseball game and you see old pictures of the baseball at Tiger Stadium. Everyone was still wearing suits back in the 30s and the 40s and even in the 50s. They were wearing suits, and that was our niche. and it would be buy one suit, get one for a penny, two for 200, and things of that nature that created value in that niche. All men wore suits. They needed a suit to go to work. They needed a suit to basically exist. And that was the premise of our store. That was the foundation of the store. And actually, quite frankly, is still the foundation of our store today.
You bring up a great point though, Danny,
Yeah.
because nobody's going to a baseball game in a suit. Maybe a guy from the office goes over and he's got a suit on.
Sure.
You find one or two suits in Comerica Park today,
Right.
but you're certainly not going to see the top hats and suits we saw in the 20s and 30s and all the way up to the 50s. Those days are done.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So fast forward.
Well, hold right there for a minute, because
Yeah.
we're touching on exactly the point of my podcast.
Yes.
Forward focus.
Yes.
And what I mean by that, Danny, is times change, people change, and people got to evolve. I trust you'd agree with that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So who was the visionary at the wheel that evolved with time with Freeds?
Well, the premise was on clothing. And from the time that my grandfather worked through the store through the 50s into the 50s, when my father and my uncle came into the store, really kind of just catered to that same premise. Be good, get to market, service, having the product, having the selection, having a ton of inventory, and giving that customer the experience that they can come into our store at any given time and get what they need. You could argue that my father and my uncle almost joined simultaneously. And my grandfather made them partners, 50-50 partners immediately. And that was
they took the reins in the 50s.
That's correct.
All right. And what did they do with Freeds?
Well, they continued along the same plan, and they expanded. They expanded their vision to the point where they became better buyers. My grandfather was a one-guy shop. He had to be here, so he did a lot of phone calls and bringing in deals on a wing and a prayer, and it worked for him. But when my father and uncle, they found, by getting to the market, by making your partners your suppliers and joining them to make our footprint bigger as a clothing force. And that's what happened during their career, where it got to the point from the 50s to the 60s. And in 1971, we made our first major expansion. We went from approximately 2,000 square feet to approximately 15,000 square feet. And that was a huge impression. And we changed the name from Sam's department store to Freeds.
And that expansion involved a physical expansion?
Huge physical floor print expansion, where we made the suit department even bigger than it was, and which also gave us the ability to buy more and have more success within that particular industry, because still in the 70s, everybody was wearing suits. It was everybody was wearing suits. So we didn't change our theories. We changed our promotions. We changed the way we advertise. But at the end of the day, it was still basically selling suits. That was the leader that brought consumers into our store.
Up until when, Danny?
Well, you could take it through the 70s. And in 1980, we had the misfortune of some vandals coming into our store and setting a fire to our store. And when the part of our building was burning, the fire department came in and smashed the shed down, but in doing so, brought all kinds of smoke damage into our store. So in 1980, we had what we called was one of the transformation things that happened to our store, where we had a smoke sale from the month of November right through to spring of 1981. And it was 30% off. It was, with the advice of our lawyers, they told us how to do it and how to file for the damage that was done to our product. And we ran that sale for what seemed to be about a year and a half. And it was very, very profitable for my father and my uncle. So much so that in 1984, we expanded again. And we,
Tell me about that. Tell me about that
and
expansion. By the way,
that was their vision.
that sale, that fire sale was a real true fire
Was
sale,
a
wasn't it?
real true fire sale. It turned out that the initial stuff that went out was sold at 30% at a 30% discount. I remember it. And the first day, people were lined up around the blocks. We had to have police escort people in because they wanted to buy the product so bad. It was just smoke. You air it out and then it goes away. But it was such a boon for the city, and it was right in front of a major mall expansion in Windsor. It was called the Devonshire Mall. Devonshire Mall was opening in around that time, and we were concerned as a store, what kind of effect would this mall have on our footprint of our business? What would that mean for our business? And this happened, but for the stroke of great luck, we rode that to a level that was so unbelievably successful that we put money in the bank and we paid for the next expansion.
And what was that?
Which
And,
is
and where are you in this role?
I went to university in Toronto, and I started in 1984, right when the expansion was starting, right when that second big expansion was starting.
And you
That
came
took us
in,
to approximately 25,000 square feet.
you came in as now the third generation
Correct.
with your cousin,
Yeah.
Ari,
Yeah.
Ari Freed, correct?
Was my partner. Yes, it was my
Yes.
partner.
And in 1984, you now expand the store once again?
Yes, and
Right.
at that point we reintroduced ladies wear, and we had a small shop outside of another area that we expanded on in '84 was our custom shop, which is a higher end part of our store that would carry clothes like Canali, Armani, Valentino, Ungaro, basically still clothing driven, but better clothing. And that was something that was new to the city because nobody ever brought in these names. So in 1984, this became our biggest growth because it was more upscale. We went to a more upscale business. All the while, people were still wearing suits. We were still able to buy clothing at great deal. The best thing about that smoke sale is that we got to sell our own inventory. Then we got to go to the market and get things at the end of a season that also supplemented. All of our suppliers are sitting with product. We were able to buy more product in, continue giving the value to the consumer, and it was an unbelievable boom.
Now, this expansion into the higher end custom shop department of Freeds,
Yeah.
that's through your eyes and Ari's eyes?
In 1984, we launched a department called Steps, and that was my responsibility. And when I was in Toronto, there was something that I saw that my father had negotiated with the owners of this company to have exclusive availability in Windsor. And that line was called Roots. Nobody in Canada, nobody in Windsor sold Roots. I saw the popularity of that product in Toronto, and it was incredible. And subsequently, we had an exclusive, and we brought it in, and I put it into this young men's department with other things, and saw that department grow from nothing to $1 million in 2 years.
Amazing.
It was absolutely an incredible,
And
and it was fortified on the ability to bring Roots into your store. Nobody else.
A forward thought, right?
Right.
Forward thinking,
Well,
forward.
it was lucky. I mean, like everything else, you have to be lucky with your decisions and make good sound.
Well, Danny, you bring up a great point. I'm gonna challenge you a little bit on that. I don't think it's luck. I don't think that things just happen because you're lucky. Luck doesn't hurt, but I think good things happen to good people who think out of the box, who take well-calculated risks. And again, I come back to the title of my podcast, and that's what this is all about.
Yep.
Changing with the times, or forward focus, looking ahead,
Right.
and anticipating. And you do that, Danny, you do that.
Throughout my 42-year career here at the store, Craig, or 41 and change, whatever it is. I'm in my 42nd year. Throughout my career, I was brought with challenges of things that I'd have to constantly do to change the dynamics of our store, whether it was through the economy, whether it was through events, whether things that were in my control, out of my control. So we talked about everybody was wearing suits all the time. Well, as we all know, that came to an end. Casual Fridays came into play, and then it became known that everybody can dress casual going to work. How does a store that sells suits as its number one primary foundational product that we've sold for 95 years, how do we change and how do we accommodate
And how did you do that?
So when that happened, so you're really talking about 80s, 90s. So you're talking about early 90s when this came into play, where people were starting to dress more casual. We were dealing with a depressed Canadian dollar. And we thought, my partner and I, Ari and I, thought that there is this multi-million person community that sits outside of our border. And at that time, it was a completely open border where you could come over to Canada with your driver's license, if you will. And we thought we needed to find a way of tapping into that customer, because all of a sudden clothing was not important anymore in Windsor. And yes, we are selling sportswear. Yes, we're selling shoes. Yes, we're selling ladies wear. Yes, we're selling better stuff. But it could never replace the volume and the success of our suit department, because that was the foundation of our store. So how are we gonna keep that machine going? So back in the day, there was a radio station called WDFN. It was 11:30 a.m. on an AM dial, and we went over there and we talked to some people, and we said we want to go on sports radio. Why did we choose sports radio? Because what do guys listen to? It was the only sports radio talk show in the Metro Detroit area. It's a sports thirsty town. Whether you love college sports, or whether you love professional sports, that's what they talk about all day. And we were the only clothing retailer on that station. So that was the big niche. And then we made a jingle. And we did it as a kind of a contest on WDFN with Mike Stone and Bob Winowski. And we made a little jingle that became the jingle of our store that still exists today. And it says, "Freeds, where fashion feels so good." And
great line. So look what you've described. What you've described is basically a timetable that has evolved with time.
Mhm.
It has changed with the times to meet the needs of the times. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So let's take that and let's compare it to all these businesses we rattled off that are no longer here.
Yeah.
So what would you say, Danny, is the secret in the sauce? Why is Freeds booming, fourth generation coming in, future looking very bright, and why are other retailers, having such difficulty? What's the distinction here that we can take away? Tell our listeners what it's all about.
There are two things. Number one, we are in Windsor, Detroit. We're in the Windsor, Detroit area. We control and we are understanding of what we can and can't sell. And when you're on the floor and you know, because you shop at the store, Craig, when you come into the store, you see me on the floor. You see my partner on the floor. We greet the customers, we listen to the customers, and we get the feeling for what they need. That's a huge advantage to all the other companies that you're talking about that are no longer in existence. They could be from cross country, but they're just big boxes that exist in communities. And I think the consumer today really wants somebody to have a face to it. And there's a face to Freeds. That is one of our secret sauce. And one of the things I've always told you is that you can come into the store, and the moment you feel like you're being sold is the moment we fail, because we're not here to sell you. Because if we sell you and you go into that event that you're buying that product for, you don't get compliments and you don't look good and it's not a great experience, we lose. We train our staff to service the customer, to listen to the customer, best communicators in the world, and the people have the ability to listen.
Well, I agree with
and that is our secret sauce.
That's right, Danny.
We are a destination, and that's our secret sauce, Craig. And it's something that my grandfather taught me in the time that he was alive. He says, $1 more, $1 less, as long as we all get along, as long as you all take care of the people that are in front of you, because that is our advantage.
Well, I think the key thing you hit upon is listening. Listening is a skill. And I couldn't agree with you more. In our business, if we don't listen, we're out of business, because what are we doing? We're listening to the problem, we're identifying the problem, and we're together creating solutions. Mm-hmm. Going back to 1929, you've evolved. And I asked you several times, what's the difference between your successful business and those that have failed? And I think you've really summed it up, Danny. You've talked about being there for your customers, listening, caring, personal service, not sales, and making people happy. And I think, isn't that what it's all about?
Well, at the end of the day, service, selection, and value have been the motto of our store forever. Why does Freeds exist in a 56,000 square foot environment in a day when everybody's buying online, everybody's going to Amazon to buy their whatever they need, their drugs, their pharmaceuticals, their pool pumps, it's all available. Why does Freed exist in a day of online where everything is about convenience?
So tell us, Andy, tell us.
I'll tell you why. Because in the clothing business, it's a touchy-feely business. It's about, you can go and buy a shirt. You can go buy a Canali suit online. But if you knew Canali like I know Canali has about 7 different fits. Now, you go into your closet and you say, well, I bought a 42 regular Canali suit. Well, that could have been the 13 body, not the 14 body, not the 15 body, not the 17 body. They're all different fits. And you don't know what's online. And the consumer goes and tries it out. Geez, I must have put on 20 pounds because I can't even do up the button. And that's the reality in our business. It's still a touchy-feely business.
Danny, for our listeners, this has been great. You fit right into what I'm talking about. I'm talking about forward focus. I keep saying it. You drive that point home better than anybody. You live it, you've moved it, and the results speak for themselves. Danny, it's been great having you on today. Your story is terrific. I know our listeners will love it. Thank you so much. We wish you all the best. And tell our listeners where to find you, Danny. Where can they find Freeds of Windsor?
We're at 1526 Ottawa Street, Windsor, Ontario. We're a whole city block, and it's right by the casino. If you get it, it's probably about 3 minutes away from the casino off of the water. We're kind of inside the city, but it's the same place where my grandfather started, just got bigger.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm Craig Zucker. I'm Craig Zucker at Maddin and Hauser. I'm located in Southfield, Michigan. I can be reached at czucker, CZUCKER at Maddin Hauser, MADDIN, HAUSER.com. Telephone number is 248-359-7522. And we're here to help you forward focus, meet your legal needs, meet the challenges of the time. Danny, thank you so much. It was just terrific having you on. All the best.
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate you giving me the opportunity.